Among Genshin's ever-growing roster of playable characters are the 7 Archons of Teyvat, 7 gods who preside over the game's 7 regions following the events of the Archon War 2,000 years ago. Each Archon is associated with an element and an ideal, and has been colloquially agreed upon as the strongest wielder of their respective elements, both from the characters within the game itself and from us, the players. While all of them roam the lands of their nations as humans, some unbeknownst to its inhabitants, they possess extraordinary power befitting their divine status, and there have been past instances where the Traveler, and by extension we, bore witness to that firsthand. Their practical strength is just as commanding as their narrative backgrounds would suggest. Presently, the Archons are all considered to be within the upper echelon of Genshin's lineup, with some of them almost indisputably being in contention for the absolute best. Though given how circumstantial Genshin's combat can be, it's not exactly possible for one to conclusively define the single best character in the game. Either way, the Archons are strong, incredibly strong, and that's reflected in their gameplay just as much as their lore. MiHoYo is known to be rather inconsistent when it comes to character design, especially in terms of lore, which is why I find the dynamics surrounding the Archons quite satisfying. Today we'll be discussing how Genshin found the perfect way to conceptualize the movesets of the first 5, and how I hope they'll do the same for Natlan and Snezhnaya's Archons when they come out. Roughly 6 months ago, Rathiel, I still don't know how to pronounce his name, posted a very interesting video on whether the Archons should always be the strongest of their elements, in anticipation for the Hydra Archon Farina, who is expected to release not too long after that video was made. Considering the narrative strength of the Archons in that they literally have jurisdiction over who to bestow their elemental powers to, it makes total sense from both a thematic and logical standpoint for them to be the strongest, as it would be kind of weird for a human with only a fraction of the power of a Gnosis to possess more strength than the person who has the actual source of power itself. That being said, considering that Genshin is first and foremost a gacha game, and gachas are notorious for their susceptibility to power creep, it wouldn't be wise to set a hard rule for Archons to be the strongest either, as that can lead to a mountain of problems in the future. No amount of premeditation and forethought can account for every possible future outcome, and so, for the sake of prudence, you want to keep things as open-ended as possible, while establishing a certain, designation for characters with narrative significance. Simply giving the highest numbers and most applications to an Archon would actually be damaging to the game, as it would discourage players from tapping into Genshin's extensive assortment of units due to Archons monopolizing everything. Conversely, if a random everyman ends up being stronger than the head honcho, it shatters their reputation and the preconceptions we have towards Archons, disillusioning us from their supposed power, which is why MiHoYo's best shot at transcribing the influence and status of an Archon into their gameplay is to indeed make them very powerful, but not make power the focus in order to avoid stagnating the game's power scaling in perpetuity. Another reason why they shouldn't draw a hard line in the sand is the very concept of visions themselves. While it's true that the 7 adjudicate on visions, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be the strongest. Visions are granted to people of Teyvat with particularly powerful desires, who have the potential to ascend to Celestia and become gods themselves. In other words, while the power given to vision holders is comparatively small to a Gnosis, it has the capability of maturing into something more, implying that exceptionally gifted individuals can indeed be stronger than the Archons in some way, shape, or form. Visions are also known to be more than just conduits of power, affording unique abilities to their wielders. For example, when protecting Liyue against Osial, Ningguang demonstrated the capacity to teleport and use geoenergy to remotely operate the Jade Chamber weapons. Mona could teleport herself and the things that she touches using her Hydro Vision, as shown in the cutscene when she, Fischl, and the Traveler made a quick retreat from Scaramouche. So there appears to be a very inconclusive description of what visions are truly capable of, leading us to believe that its power is what the holder makes of it, not a predetermined set of faculties. All of this is why I'm pleasantly surprised with how they executed on the first 5 Archons gameplay designs, in that rather than trying to make them the strongest of their elements, they chose to have them represent, or better yet, embody the keystone of their championed elements. This means that while there may be vision holders with exceptional power, potentially surpassing the Archons in applicable strength, there is no one who symbolizes the element's core principles more than them. Animo's core principle is rooted in control and assimilation, with many of its units being able to forcibly displace enemies and absorb other elements to use as its own while reciprocating the element via augmentation, exactly what wind is all about. Strong winds can forcibly move things and make them more dangerous, especially if they're flying in fast speeds. No one showcases this better than the Animo Archon Venti. His elemental skill sends all enemies and himself airborne, creating a vertical draft that you can ride by gliding through it. In addition, his elemental burst remains to this day the single most powerful crowd control ability bar none, drawing all enemies towards the vortex and dealing significant damage while rendering smaller enemies completely at the mercy of your team's abilities. Like Rathiel said, in the early days of Genshin, Venti was considered the strongest Animo unit purely from a lack of competition, with the only other members of his cadre being Jean, Sucrose, and Animo Traveler. Fast forward 3 years later, and the Animo roster has a commendable lineup of units, both damage dealers and supports alike. Suffice to say nowadays, Venti has a fairly humble position for a divine being, but he still serves as an enduring symbol of what Animo is all about. He is to this day the emblematic unit for Anemo. Others may have more DPS than him, or they may have more buffs than him, but no one adheres to Anemo's principles more than him. Geo's core principle is founded on the basis of permanence. While its members are known for their brute strength, Geo is primarily about standing your ground and powering through adversity no matter how strong. Zhongli epitomizes this. While it took significant buffs for him to reach that point, he's still far and away the best unit in the realm of survivability. His skill provides you with arguably the strongest protective utility in the game, withstanding fatal amounts of damage without losing structural integrity. And if sufficiently built, or if you have Constellation 2, you can sometimes go entire fights without any of your units taking a single point of damage. Back in the day, Zhongli developed a reputation for turning Genshin into Minecraft peaceful mode, effectively removing any semblance of challenge or difficulty from the game. His elemental burst also provides you with excellent utility by petrifying all non-boss enemies caught within the strike zone, preventing them from attacking you for a short time. He's a fantastic unit when it comes to neutralizing enemy pressure. In a similar fashion to Venti, however, as time passed, the game introduced more characters and ways for you to sustain yourself, especially recently with the gradual shift away from shields and more towards healers in light of Fontaine's units having mechanics entailing manipulation of health as a resource. Even so, Zhongli never fails to safeguard teams against enemies with superior offense, making him a vital asset for players to have from now until the end of time. Provided, you pay for everything. God, this guy's a freeloader. Electro's core principle is energy, fitting as lightning is heavily condensed energy. Electro not only utilizes energy as a resource like the other elements, but it also channels it as power. Their persistent attacks and frequent usage of elemental skills create a steady stream of energy regeneration that can allow for extreme pressure at their fullest capacity. Optimizing these aspects is Raiden Shogun. In addition to both her passive talent and personal weapon increasing attack power based on energy recharge, she serves as a battery and steroid for her team, increasing their elemental burst damage, and when they generate energy and use their bursts, they in turn power hers, which upon activation greatly increases her DPS and gradually charges her team to repeat the cycle over and over again. On many occasions, Shogun has been affectionately compared to a nuclear reactor. Nuclear energy is known to be extremely efficient and sustainable, but it can also just as easily be a destructive force, both of which apply to her quite appropriately. Other Electro units have since made advancements in their respective fields, with theirs being higher in demand every so often. Right now, the ongoing debate is whether or not Fischl is the best Electro unit or Shogun, considering they both have a substantial amount of equity in the Electro market. And while Fischl's dominance comes from her unparalleled rate of application, Shogun underscores what Electro is all about: energy. Seeing as how energy is such an essential part of Genshin's combat, Shogun will always find a reason to be used. She pioneered the first widely used meta-team composition in the game and is also adapted rather nicely to the new Dendro meta, serving as a reminder of how eternal her presence is and always will be. Dendro's core principle closely resonates with the aspect of nature, intertwinement. At the risk of sounding cheesy, nature is all around us, from the ground we stand on to the grass, of which many of you guys are in serious need of touching I might add, to the trees. All the various flora and fauna on the land, skies, and seas is nature, and that is exactly what Nahida represents. She's all about being as ubiquitous as nature itself. Her elemental skill offers extensive area coverage through connected target selection, persistently reapplying Dendro whenever they take reaction or bloom core damage, essentially meaning they're always going to have Dendro on them provided they're marked by her skill. The enormous coverage of her elemental burst and the synergistic properties with other elements further exhibit the omnipresence of Dendro, how closely it works with other elements to achieve different things, not unlike Anemo. Currently, Nahida is the strongest Dendro character and likely will be for years or possibly forever, but I believe that has less to do with miHoYo intending for her to be the strongest and more just the concept of Dendro being present all around us that she can't help but be overpowered. Arguments can be made over if she's one of the strongest units in all of Genshin Impact, and in my opinion that's not too far-fetched of a claim to make. After all, Mother Nature is frequently touted for having forces beyond what humanity can even come close to replicating, so it's perfectly reasonable that the Archon of Dendro is as powerful as she is. Even if somehow Nahida loses her position, she will always deliver on any and all of your Dendro needs quite efficiently. Hydra's core principle is reminiscent of Dendro, but on a more primordial level. Water is the basis of life. Everything that lives depends on water in some capacity, and that's illustrated by how it's a prerequisite for virtually every important elemental reaction in the game. More than just that, water is known for its fluidity, figuratively and literally. It can adapt to any situation, any playstyle, and any function you need. No one embodies this more than Furina, whose elemental skill can alternate between dealing heavy amounts of damage or sustaining her party, giving her immense usability from that alone. Her elemental bursts, on the other hand, symbolizing the dangerous force water can be as well, increasing everyone's attack strength on a scale no one can come close to replicating, and at the same time, the increased healing bonus touches on the other symbolic aspect of water, recovery. The continuous uptime of her abilities emphasizes the constant need for water to function. This is of course depicted by the Hydra roster entirely, but Furina is a personification of everything Hydra stands for. fluidity, recovery, support, and power. It's unclear as to whether she's the strongest Hydro character though, as true to the nature of water, it ebbs and flows, constantly fluctuating. One moment Xingqiu is the best choice for this, the next moment it might be Yelan, it could be Kokomi, it could be any of them. If I may offer my own take on the matter, I think that in terms of absolute strength, it's without a doubt Furina. But to be fair, she's the most recent Archon to be released and has had many more years of balanced hindsight than her predecessors, which brings me nicely to the final point I want to make about them. One more thing to make note of is that the Archons were all balanced around the time they came out, something Rathiel emphasized in his video. Venti was the strongest Anemo character for the time he was released. Zhongli was the strongest Geo character following the buffs he received not too long after his release. Shogun was easily the best Electro unit after her release, so on and so forth. The reason Nahida and Furina have a comparatively higher power budget than Venti and Zhongli is mainly because of time. Genshin doesn't power creep as fast as other gachas, but you can't deny that with each passing version, units definitely come with more and more stuff, or some of them anyway. But that only makes the Archons all the more impressive. Even though Venti was designed around version 1.0 standards, the fact that he's still the go-to option for any of those mobbing stages is a testament to how thoughtfully they designed his kit. Zhongli, same thing, he may not be fielded as often anymore, but if and when there's ever a dungeon or boss that threatens you with big damage, everyone calls for him again. I remember in 3.7, that was a really tough spiral abyss. Everyone was wishing they had two Zhonglis because of how hard the enemies are hitting. Even though other Electro units got indirectly buffed from Dendro more than she did, Shogun's immaculate battery capability and burst rotation combo will find her spot in more teams, whether as a support or main damage dealer. Furina and Nahida are part of the quote-unquote modern-day power scale, so they're fine. With all this in mind, I'm really curious of how they plan to go about making Murata and the Tsaritsa. Pyro is of course the element of power, all about raw destructive force, whether dealing it or increasing it. The conspiracy theory most players have is that she'll basically be 5-star Bennett, but I actually am inclined to believe that she'll be a damage dealer, not a support. When you think of power, you're not really thinking about supporting, right? You're thinking about being the power. Everyone probably thinks Murata will be a support in light of there being too many Pyro on-field damage dealers already, but I mean, they made Furina a support even though Hydro was packed with supports already, so I don't think that's a reason for them to avoid going down that route. Besides, she's the god of war. I'd imagine her being the frontline general destroying everyone, not the cunning tactician chilling in strategy meetings. That being said, I think Pyro will be the one element where she has to be the strongest just for the sheer fact that it's power, nothing more, nothing less. But so long as it's intentional, that's fine. Besides, none of the first 5 Archons overlap with each other. If Murata was a damage boosting support, she might clash with Furina. So for the sake of individuality, my money's on her being a DPS. As for the Tsaritsa, Cryo was always known for its persistence. Many Cryo units have skills or bursts that remain on the field for long stretches of time. Ganyu, Shenhe, Diona, Rosaria to name a few. Tsaritsa can maybe go in this direction too. Although, there's a possibility that she might do something entirely different. It's implied that she wants to change Tevat in some grand way, evidenced by her collecting every other Archon's gnosis. Also, the ideal she's implied to represent is love, but everyone knows that love and hate are two sides of the same coin. Given that Dainsleif says she's a god with no love left, maybe she might have a twisted version of what we think the cryo element serves. I might just be looking too deep into it. I still believe she's a villain, despite some claiming that she has a very noble purpose behind her goals, like Child. So maybe what we might see instead of persistence is the opposite. She could be a cryo one-shot DPSer. The current melt teams, namely Risley and Ganyu, are more consistent DPS oriented, so I like to imagine that she's going to have an extremely unorthodox playstyle than every other cryo unit. Another aspect is that she gives out delusions, which are artificial visions and have a corrupted connotation to them. Again, I might just be overthinking it. Regardless, I love how they designed the first 5 Archons to be enduring symbols of their respective elements, and I'm excited to see the last 2 Archons come out and how they embody theirs. What are your thoughts on this though? Let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to check out Rathiel's video on the Archons if you haven't yet, it's a pretty good watch. And aside from that, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you could leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Genshin discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.